Yeah, yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Spiritually Speaking. I'm Dee, and I have Michael O'Connor, astrologer, back with us today to continue our chat from last time. So, Michael, welcome back.
Thank you, Dee. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
You're very welcome. I'm so happy you're here. I'm so excited about this conversation. See where it takes us today.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's always exciting to explore the world of archetypes and astrology and metaphysics. It's where I live pretty much. So,
Yes.
and I see you're a avid enthusiast yourself, at least. That's why
Yeah.
you're so eager to host this podcast, I guess, right?
Yes.
To explore. Yeah, good one.
Yeah, it's so much fun because what I love about it is that, and I think I might have mentioned this to you before, maybe not on the podcast, but in a pre-chat, that it's so fascinating to me to see the different areas where people take the spirituality, metaphysical type stuff. It's not, there's not one set criteria for it. It's just a wide open space that you can make into whatever you need it to be. And that's one of the things I love about it. And then, of course, the science that goes along with it is, I love it. I was actually speaking to someone about this the other day because, well, yesterday, as a matter of fact, that it kind of eliminates or at least softens a lot of the skepticism around this stuff because there's actually science that backs it up now, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, life in the physical on this earth and is what I interpret to be a school for souls. I think we mentioned that last time. And in the school, there's many classes, many areas of focus, right? Just
Yeah.
like a large school. And of course, there's different levels and grades. And the bottom line is everybody's a soul learning here. So at whatever level a person's oriented to focus, learn, etc., that's great. So as long as where it gets troublesome is where the word should enters the picture,
Mhm.
and control, fear, oppression, a kind of a herd mentality on the march can really project in a collective way upon whole groups. And of course, history's full of that, right? Religious wars and prejudices and so forth. So that's part of the whole drama of the game board, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's a the divide and conquer type of mentality, which is so, and it's incredible how early in life we learn it. It's just unbelievable.
Fear, as they say, it's a beautiful, simple dichotomy, and which is always good to boil things down, I think, to the simple dichotomies like yin and yang, up
Mhm.
and down, black and white, and that is that love and fear.
Yeah.
And, we all at any given moment are bouncing. The spiritual path can be understood as becoming anchored in love, which is not strictly a sentimental thing. It's actually a unity thing.
Mm.
If
Yes.
we're in love, we're in a kind of unity, communion. It nurtures acceptance, tolerance, and so forth. Where the fear is oriented to the instinctual survival mind, which tends to be reactive and in its offensive defense. And this is very much what the ego mind does, and they're synonymous. The fear and the ego mind is the tendency is to divide, sort, categorize, and differentiate, which is not bad because we see reality. We need to divide, sort, categorize, and differentiate, right, with
Right.
what our perceptions. The problem is when we become anchored in divide, sort, categorize, and differentiate, and then it becomes amplified by fear.
Hmm.
So yeah, and we clearly it's Shakespearean, in which means it's timelessly there.
Hmm.
So for all our technology, for all our advancement, It's still very alive and well.
Mhm.
And dark force could be seen to use it. It uses that divide and conquer, as you said it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
It's absolutely
dark
amazing to
force
me because
here.
the noticing is just, like we aren't supposed to use these certain terms because they're not politically correct to differentiate in a way of describing someone, and
Mhm.
sometimes I'll use terms just to describe what I'm seeing. And I had an occasion where I was talking to another girl and she like got really upset with me because I used this descriptive term and I wasn't using it in a derogatory manner at all. And she came unglued. I'm like, you are completely taking this out of proportion. That's not even what I'm saying at all. I'm not being derogatory or condescending. I'm just stating that, like if you would see a blonde person and you would say that person has blonde hair, that to me it's a descriptive term. And we take it to the nth degree and make it like it's this horrible use of language when all it is a description, you know? And I don't I don't think we don't have to do that. It's a choice that we make, right?
In in this school, there's a lot of grades and levels, as mentioned, like preschool, kindergarten, elementary, high school, and so people everywhere, invariably in society, there's many levels of perception and interpretation, I think, going on. I've been looking at this for many years. And what happens is people think they know themselves, but they don't know their mind very well. They don't understand that we human beings, all of us, invariably project. We're like mini projectors.
Yes.
It's like in terms of metaphorical scientific thinking, a human being is like a multi-dimensional transceiver, like we transmit and we receive both from the outside and the inside, like we're receiving inner pressures, whether it's physiological, but also moralistic, etc. So we're complex beings, right?
Yes.
But the main point is we project. So in when a person sort of relatively unawake, what would be called unawake. And people wonder, what does that mean not to be awake? It
Right.
means that you're not self-reflectively aware. You
Hmm.
don't realize that you're projecting and their desire to know that is not there.
Right.
Their ability to know that isn't very strong. So it's a kind of a never-ending story. Like it's tempting. I observe people kind of wondering when are we going to come around the corner when we're going to have it all kind of figured out.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes like this. In the metaphor of the school, I've come to look at it this way. There's always new children in kindergarten.
Yes.
There's always a new, okay, and a new grade one, grade two. It's always happening. So the notion that it's a school for souls is there, but we shouldn't assume that the soul group is finite. It keeps happening. It keeps, okay. So it's hard to know who's to know that answer. Is it a finite pool and school of souls? Or is this school, ever available for new entrants, new participants, new students? So
Yeah.
if you understand what I mean there, it means there is no final outcome. It's a never-ending story. And that's where we use that term Shakespearean,
Yeah.
because it can be a little bit disheartening for people because they want the final outcome. They want that we've arrived, we've arrived.
Yeah, that
And it's like,
tangible.
it's kind of like, yeah. And what happens is, that notion of finality, that notion of conclusion actually in its own way contributes to the problem. It becomes fanatical, adamant. We must. It becomes desperate, you see.
Yeah.
So when you kind of go into, I think when you go into that never-ending story, you relax a bit.
Hmm.
But so yeah, so people project their story, and inside their mind. Not that they're not don't have a reason to be here, or in fact, they are souls at the deep, right? But in their mind, they're confused, lost, frightened, and, well, quite frankly, toxic.
Yeah, very much so.
Toxic.
Yeah. And that
So
individual actually
she's
was
like,
in a very strong way. And I ended up having to, well, the universe created a situation where I absolutely had no choice but to get away from her. So, yeah. As the universe will
yeah,
do to take care of us when we think we're in the midst of the madness, the universe is actually has us in this nice little bubble taking care of us, which is something that was hard for me to realize. But I did realize that a lot of times when the situation feels like total crap, it's the best thing for us that's happening.
that's a very wise perspective for sure. I agree. It's all happening for us, not to us. And yet the school requires us to learn lessons and so forth. So it's a bit stoic. You have to be in spiritual warrior mode to really embrace the notion it's happening for you.
Yeah.
And of course, within that, there's a various degrees, as you say, and I agree with you, of protection.
Hmm.
Guardian angel principle.
Yes.
The idea at, guardian angel could be interpreted in a variety of ways, and it's all good. But yeah, it's whether it's our own soul, which I tend to think it is,
Hmm.
but there may be other energies as well, because, I myself do believe in angelic energy. It's basically higher dimensional life forms that angels are, by the way, on that note, I've come to learn, let's put it that way, from this particular teacher who's quite advanced. He says there's different levels of angels, but generally speaking, angels are our non-material manifest cousins. Like we're related to them directly.
Hmm.
There's a, like, as though this angelic, I don't know all angels, but generally archangels is like a different conversation. It's another kind of conversation. It's not like excluded, but just general angels. Yeah, they're like us evolving through a non-embodiment cycle, and they want to help us, is a nice way of looking at it. So kind of dovetails with what you're saying in a way. We're protected. I agree, though. Well, you said the universe, and I agree. There's a wholeness to that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
We have to ask for help though from the angels. And that's something, I mean, I feel like there are situations, I didn't expect this to go the angel route, but it's cool because I love this topic. But
yeah,
I feel like there are situations where we don't have to ask, like we're actually incapable of asking in those situations. So the angels will just come and just help us in those situations. But on a day-to-day basis, I didn't realize until, like in the last year that we really do need to ask for their help. They're there and they desire to help us, but they don't interfere. So we actually have to ask them for their help and guidance. And I used to
I
not be
agree.
one to like ask for help. I felt, oh, if I can't do it myself, then it can't be done or shouldn't be done or whatever. And then I listened to this podcast with this lady who channels the archangels. And I'm not able usually to get through most of those kind of conversations because most of it doesn't resonate with me, but it did with her. And before I knew it, I was at the end, and the host of the podcast asked her if there was anything else she wanted to say. And she mentioned about asking for help, that they really want us and they're waiting for us to ask for help. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to try this out. And man, it's been a game changer for me. Like it has been a game changer. It's been amazing.
Awesome. Well, there you go. Yes, asking, yeah, free will is a universal law as I understand it. And so sure, yeah, we have to ask. We have according to my studies in astrology and so on, and like my studies in astrology go much deeper than astrology itself because I've always been interested in how and why it works.
Yeah.
That's what's made me really drive into the deeper perspective. Not just that it works and that I'm working with it, but how and why does it work, which
Yeah.
gets into archetypal universal law principles like you're talking about. But yes, free will being that. And but we have a dharma, destiny, that people will say, I create my own destiny. It's like, no, you don't actually. You co-create is a
Yeah.
much different statement, much different statement. So it's like co-creation involves relationship, engagement, cooperation, and as you say, uh, inviting in a co-creative way assistance, divine help. How simply obvious is that? Right? Yeah,
It's hiding in
you're
plain
right.
sight. It really is one of those things that's just, it's right there for us all to see if we just open our eyes to see it.
That's what I call, by the way, this is where we're getting into a different conversation, but it really dovetails well. We get into what's called spiritual science. Like basically, mainstream material science has usurped the word science
Mhm.
and taken it over, and in a kind of a dogmatic way has asserted its own paradigm of materialism onto it, right? So the average person who doesn't really think beyond social conditioning, like, like watching the news is social conditioning.
Yes.
If you don't go beyond which, if you don't begin to really search, journey, explore, ask questions, be critical in your thinking beyond social conditioning, well, you're going to probably buy right into notions that science is absolute in its perspective, but material science is empirical and it misses, like, even by studying sight alone or hearing or any sense faculty, for example, we realize A, that our empirical perceptions are limited, and B, as has been shown by scientists, they run into paradoxical realities.
Yeah.
So the linear logic of empiricism breaks down, right? And that I think that's quite frankly, partially at least what's going on in the world.
Hmm.
That's where you come in. That's where you come in your own way. You're participating in opening up perceptions, right? Which in their own way, as like a candle lit in a dark room, awakens the realization of other considerations. But yeah, so I was think of material science in the most positive sense. We look at the world and science, we go, wow, thank you so much, right?
Yeah.
Especially from the standpoint of technology,
Hmm.
like engineering.
Yeah.
We have all this amazing refrigeration and even, modern medicine, especially in its technological aspect,
Hmm.
not to mention the awareness, but so now that we have the science, the technological prowess, what I think is happening is we're swinging back to taking the word science away from the purely empirical and and really when we say that it's only a return to a more ancient knowing. So the ancients were into science, but they didn't reduce it to empiricism.
Yeah. It's so interesting you said that because I'm not a scientist. I don't want to be a scientist. That's not my goal in
Yeah.
life, but I love listening to scientists talk, especially if they're really engaging ones. And the ones that I follow and listen to are just brilliant, but they're able to, I shouldn't say but, and they're able to bring forth the information in a fun and interesting way, at least to me, where I stay engaged through these 3 and 4 hour long podcasts that I listen to. And I want more. Like at the end of the conversation, I'm like, oh, we're done? What? Like, we can't be done yet. But in the recent ones, a couple recent ones I've listened to, I know there are some leading edge people in this arena who are bringing forth information. And I was listening to one podcast the other day where the guy was on this well-known podcast. I'm not going to name drop right now, but and he was talking about his perspective on it. And there was another scientist there that was a strictly in one area, but they were talking about this one particular piece. And one of the things this scientist said was science has rules. There are rules that must follow, and this guy was outside of the rules of this science. And I thought to myself, and I even discussed it with Steve, I'm like, but like, aren't we missing the point? Like, science didn't used to have all these rules and laws. We were learning as we went, and that's what made it science. Like, it was ever expansive. Like, oh, now we've learned this and we can bring that in. And it was like this guy was totally, and I'm not saying he's right or he's wrong because I'm not a scientist and I don't have the knowledge to know the answer to the question. But I felt like in my soul, like, wait a second, aren't we missing something? Aren't we supposed to be looking for new information still? Like, is it still science technically if we're just taking this block we've already learned and sticking strictly to that? And then I was also listening to, and I wish I could remember his name, but he made the series on Netflix, Ancient Apocalypse. He's absolutely brilliant. And I love listening to him talk. I don't know if you've watched that show, but he talks about different archaeological sites and how there's more information there than what the broad band of archaeologists wish to accept and explore. And there's way more, and that's what he's putting out there. And I don't know why there's so much resistance. I don't get it. Why there's so much resistance, why they want to shut people like him down and make them be quiet about the expansiveness of what's still left to be learned. So that's, I'm like, why wouldn't you want more? Why wouldn't you still want to learn? Like, I can't wrap my head around that concept.
Because I would offer it's because you're pure-hearted. Let's put it this way. To say science has rules is valid,
Mm-hmm.
but the question I would have asked him is, okay, science has rules, but does science rule? Is the question I would ask. Because as soon as a scientist starts talking, I'm thinking, wow, there's no doubt that there's a lot of bright people, brilliant, in fact, genius even, but that doesn't mean their paradigm, their worldview is absolute. That the problem with science is it's an absolutist model of thinking. It's there's no other way. It's become dogmatic. So it's like rules is good. Ruling us with notions, that's called propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
That and when it basically we could say life in the physical is a school, right? But I also like to refer to it as a game. Now, the school, you might say, has recess, lunch, art, gym, all the kind of fun stuff. So there's a
Yeah.
game in the school or a game factor, right? So what I mean by the game is the game of life is about power. It's all about power. So power we talked about this last time briefly. I just want to readdress it. We
Mm-hmm.
all want power. We all need power. Food, clothing, shelter are forms of power.
Mm-hmm.
Having talents and gifts and opportunities is power. Having fuel in the tank. It goes on and on what power is.
Mm-hmm.
But when power is pursued with fear, it implies attachment. And what happens then is bias, prejudice. So it's one thing to say a person's brilliant about something, but if their mind is closed to things they don't understand because they assume they see things in an absolute way, now you're dealing with a highly intelligent person who lives in a box.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually, ironically, where many scientists live. They're
Mm-hmm.
highly intelligent, living in a box, and they're not honest in their science by exploring realities that transcend that box, and they're boxed in
Mhm.
by their rules.
Yeah.
See
Yeah.
that? So it's like in religion, there's rules. Now, it's fair to say, science isn't strictly a religion, but it can be deemed dogmatic.
Mhm.
And so when we get into this whole discussion of power, and that's the whole thing, it's natural for people to seek power, but they don't realize as fully, they're not as self-reflectively aware of that they're determined to be right in an absolutist sense.
Mhm.
You so in other words, their aspiration to power is linked to a kind of control and fear.
Mm.
You, for example, in what you're doing, and I myself am feel definitely that in my work as an astrologer, I'm always here to recognize who the person is and help them see that as a means of empowering them.
Right.
So the difference is fear controls and love empowers. You are an empowerer. You aspire that way. So that you're when you wonder why that question why is because they're locked into fear control more than they realize.
Mm.
Fear control. They're like, we're scientists. We need to wipe out anything metaphysical, anything mystical, anything that doesn't live in our box. And that's that if you get close to them, at worst, they start becoming like that. That's nonsense. That's bogus. That's
Mhm.
pseudo. That's something they can't. So they assume an absolutist posture, negating everything from astrology to angels to metaphysics. So on the larger game board of power in the world, and there's deep roots of families. Okay, you can call them networks and families. They use fear, propaganda, control to control the game board. So somebody who comes along with a brilliant open mind who's investigating ancient sites, revealing that there's clues that history as we know it is not as we know it,
Yeah.
that we don't have to go even that far back, but there's lineages, networks, etc., families, if you like, that don't want others to know because they live in fear control,
Yeah.
which, altogether, by the way, can be understood and I mean this in the sense of it's a in an adjectival sense. It's a satanic force. Satanic, not Satan as a being or a person. I don't go with that.
Yeah. Me neither.
Satanic means attachment, fear, control, basically.
Mhm.
Attachment, fear, control. Those three words. Attachment, fear, control. That's satanic. Even even more pure-hearted orientations can lapse into it at times.
Sure.
They go into fear control. Okay, right?
Yeah.
But there's a higher likelihood because they're more centered in love, empowerment,
Mhm.
non-attachment. They will get out of it quicker. They'll like, oh, I see. Oh, I'm caught in that
Yeah.
satanic fear, control, attachment. But some even very brilliant people live in fear, control, attachment. But even though they're good, they're not far from we must eradicate all notions of those things.
Yeah.
And because they want to achieve a final outcome like science will prevail, we will
Yeah.
finally arrive. But
Right. But it's almost the attitude of hold up just a second, I'm going to prove you wrong. You know? And the way I look at things is so different. And I feel the way you
yes,
look at things too is like, I love to ask the question, what if? What if that is, and what if that is a possibility? Let's sit down and look at that. Like I'm curious about it. Let's
Yeah,
talk about it more. Let's explore it a little, and
yeah,
see where it goes. And
yeah.
then let that prove me wrong instead of me proving you wrong. Like, let's just take that idea and play with it a little and see where it takes us.
That that to me indicates you're heart-centered, you're inclusive.
Hmm.
See, another word that goes with fear, control, attachment is exclusive.
Yeah.
They want to exclude, eliminate. Okay. So that's really important to understand that consideration that is. So you, again, love includes because it's unity, communion consciousness, where fear excludes. Okay, does not want to consider it's kind of a type of righteousness.
Hmm.
So when you, as you're doing, celebrate all kinds of levels and modes of perception, right? That I would interpret as inclusive, and there you go. You're opening the doors. The opposite is they want to close the door. So I might generally say, in going forward, if you're listening to people who are strongly committed to the material science paradigm, listen carefully and ask them, what about this? What about that?
Hmm.
Right? Like, say point blank, what about multidimensionality? Or what about astrology? Or what about things you have not studied and you don't understand? Then that response, unless the person has examined their own assumptions, they will hit the wall of the box
Hmm.
fast,
Yeah.
fast. And it will happen commonly. So it's a more rarer thinker that will scientist who will be able to operate in the scientific box and do well. And I take my hat off to it because it's a very sophisticated box.
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
very, whether it's the mathematics of science or biology, chemistry, and all the deep sciences that go with it,
Hmm.
physics. It's a very sophisticated box, but it is still in that box. And once what's happening in the world and you're participating, and I say I am too, is we're reconsidering that. But a part of the above and beyond the science is the politics of power. And a lot of politicians or those involved in power, they're not very scientific. They're not very metaphysical. They're not, all they know is the politics of power.
Yeah.
That's where it becomes a different, that's I'm kind of referring to who, like, there's, well, basically Marshall McLuhan is one among others who clearly stated whoever controls the media controls the masses.
Yeah.
You heard that statement, right?
Yes.
So we live in that world now. That's the human condition. We live in a world that's controlled by media, which and what is not clearly understood or considered, I think, by many people is that behind the media is the politics of power, and behind the politics of power, or the means of the politics of power, includes monopoly. Monopoly, like only a few conglomerates own everything.
Yeah.
But then you go, well, what's behind monopoly? The answer invariably is going to be fear.
Hmm.
It's going to be, I'll offer these words: prejudice,
Yeah.
pride, prejudice, pride, bias, those words. And so you start to see the words, right? Prejudice, bias, pride, fear, attachment. So, and with modern technology now, the opportunity to exercise that control is very high.
Hmm.
So if, for example, if one does a little digging, you realize very quickly that all the news stations are owned by a very few companies.
Yes.
So it's not just that they own the grocery stores and the department stores and stuff. They own the media.
Yeah. It's
So, and the
absolutely incredible
university.
to me. And it's even more amazing that most people are like this. They don't want to see it. They're not going to take those blinders off and see it, even if you show it to them. And I had this discussion with a lady yesterday about the power of planting seeds. I feel like we can't underestimate the power of planting seeds because even though someone may not be ready to hear that information, it's going to be in there and they're going to be thinking about it on some level, even if it's a subconscious level. And that I feel is important, you know. But
Sure, it is. It is.
to the
Yeah.
point of owning the grocery stores too, I feel like I've been learning so much about the stuff that's put in our foods and things like that, and that how we really truly are being poisoned. That's a whole nother soapbox. We could do a whole podcast just on that. And I don't want to go down that road too much, but I'd like for you, if you would, to tell me how you feel about the effects of what we're eating and drinking on our pineal gland, which is the source, right, of our expanded knowledge, expanded consciousness.
Well, it's exactly related to what we're talking about: fear, control, prejudice. It's sort of it's a form of insanity, really. When you get really close to fear, control, attachment,
Mhm.
pride, prejudice, etc. What could be xenophobic? It's whether it's national pride or cultural pride or religious pride or whatever the pride is, it's
Right.
in there. So when unfortunately, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So what that means when we say corrupts, it makes them insane. So the insanity now has reached a point where the control it needs, again, the projection is it must be absolute. So what in history, military history, for example, one of the most fundamental strategies of any military campaign was to cut off the supply train,
Hmm.
the food.
Right.
Okay, because if you really study history and you really study warfare, for example, you realize that there's a massive industry around both building infrastructure, technology, and of course, the very fundamental reality of food
Hmm.
and water,
Yes.
right? No food, no water, the game is over. So
Yeah.
there's no, okay. It's just an example of that there's we've arrived at the human condition has arrived at a place where there are the power has landed in the hands of the few, and
Mhm.
they unfortunately seem to operate from fear. So in their orientation to control the game board, monopoly, just a few companies own everything,
Mhm.
etc. It's sort of part of the entire insanity, the rationalization of the insanity is to, get right down to the nitty gritty of controlling the food supply, which, of course, immediately starts getting in the conversation of how a part of the reality of life is we need to consume nutrition, right? Nutrition. So if nutrition is tampered with and poisoned,
Mhm.
you now have defeated the enemy. In other words, a part of okay, another tactic in warfare is poisoning.
Right.
Poison. Yeah, poisoning. It's the oldest story in the book. You poison the ruler, you poison the people. Right? So you can either restrict their access or you can poison their access. So yeah, it's a form of insanity. So it kind of comes full circle there to realize that we're in a very complex moment in history,
Mhm.
right? Like it's the human condition with modern technology has arrived at what I suppose could be called a crucible. we are at a very, very complex moment of like whether it's nuclear power, like bombs,
Right.
nuclear bombs, specifically nuclear war. I don't mean nuclear power plants as such, which I generally recognize to at least have viable uh, use,
Mhm.
as opposed to, but a nuclear war is a different conversation.
Yes, it is.
And that's part of the dilemma. But the question is, are we, being protected from creating a nuclear war, or is there another evil, like some insane xenophobic something? Like, some that's where it gets into the conversation of some people have theorized quite extensively that it's not even human beings. It's an alien. They on one hand talk about an alien force that often you hear people referring to the Orions
Hmm.
as this dark, insidiously corrupt, dark, just like Star Trek, this kind of nasty network of real buggers,
Yeah.
right? And that they're either mind controlling people on this planet at their source, or those people in, for whatever reason, are in league with them. There's that.
Yeah.
But then it goes into another more metaphysical perspective. That's metaphysical enough because it would have to be even an Orion like other culture would have to be accessed interdimensionally, not like spaceships, but interdimensional, which is a but the other one that is called the lower dimensions, what's generally referred to as the archons. You've heard about that?
I don't think I've heard of the archons, and I do listen to this stuff. I follow people that talk about this extraterrestrial stuff quite extensively. I follow several people that do, so I'm really used to. I actually have a book called by Elena Danan called "A Gift from the Stars," where she lays out a lot of these extraterrestrials and actually has drawings in there of what they look like and everything. So I'm definitely into that and love exploring that. So, but I don't think I've heard of them though.
I personally am a very skeptical person. I don't doubt life, the whole universe, the galaxy, etc., is flowing with life.
Hmm.
But I also believe that there's a lot of channeling that goes on the planet, and channeling is not what I deem to be authority myself. But so they will channel notions of aliens. But that said, I can't, on the other hand, refute them. I
Right.
don't want to say it's not. I'm not saying it's not true, but it's like, human imagination can really paint a really lovely, convincing picture. Just look at what we can do on television, like movies, like say Star Trek.
Right.
We can create the semblance of a reality that seems very, very, convincing. So that's why I'm skeptical about that. But again, that's not because I don't think they exist. It's just other beings and other life forms, but I'm still not convinced yet. But the other one, archons, are what's called lower dimensional entities that one, it generally speaking, it's believed that those involved in black magic, or now versus the satanic force, is now what's called satanic ritual.
Hmm.
Not to get too dark here, but satanic ritual means they're trying to evoke darkness, power,
Right. Yep.
like dark power. Okay. But apparently that's a very like that act, the dark power, the lower dimensions already have access to, like, so some people believe they have contaminated the minds and of certain people in power.
Yes.
So if you like, just generally would say this, it's a pretty dark subject, but it's worth being aware of generally. I look at it too, theoretically.
Hmm.
Like I'm not, I dive pretty deep, but don't draw conclusions very easily.
Right.
Whatever the science is, like even astrology, I study 5 different systems of astrology, and they're all different. So
Yeah.
I can, when in the astrological world, for example, people are very dogmatic and narrow-minded in various branches of astrology. And it's like, look, there's no need for this. Like this, there's five different systems already, and they all operate on similar principles. But even in that world, there's dogma, there's
Mhm.
fear, there's
Right.
exclusivity, there can only be one consciousness. See, the you and I think, I operate on that God is one, where that's inclusion,
Yes.
whole holism, like one, like it's all one, it's all God, it's all like in all its multidimensionality and all of the galaxies of the universe, it's all God, if you like, very
Yeah.
inclusive.
Yes.
Whereas dogma and fear is there can only be one.
Yeah.
And really the word only just so happens to rhyme with lonely,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's there. That they only there so there's it's kind of like the ego mind once again is reductionistic. It's
Hmm.
fearful, so it wants to exclude, eliminate, annihilate. And so indirectly, that's what I'm trying to tell you, that the game board of power operates. Unfortunately, the human condition has arrived at a very fearful, it's not arrived only, but we've arrived at a place with modern technology where we're now aware of the level of control that's hidden. It's hidden. We don't see it. It's
Yeah.
not like the elected government. It's not the elected government. It's not the bureaucracy, meaning the people who work in the government. It's not them.
Right.
It's something else. It's something else, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's been, it's been theorized, even in Christianity, satanic forces, fallen angels.
Yeah.
So it,
The thing that came to my mind when I was listening to you talk about that is control or destroy. Like it's if you can't control
same
it,
thing.
then you must destroy it. And I feel like as humans operate very heavily in that realm. And if we can't control
Exactly.
it or destroy it, then we can teach it to destroy itself, which I feel like is what has happened with this divide and conquer thing, that people have just turned on each other. And it's bananas to me. Like, I mean, I just
Well, fear is a weapon as well as a reality. So they use the fear as a weapon and as division. Like in other words, another military tactic is that you get, if there can be, like in World War II, more than one front. It's not just these
right.
guys against those guys. It can be multiple fronts, right?
Yes.
So if you're in, for whatever reason, you're a certain like empire and you're fighting another empire, say a dynasty historically, and that dynasty invariably has allies.
Yes.
If you can incite them to fight, well, you have
Yeah.
achieved something. So it's fairly elementary. When you
Hmm.
get into the tactical thinking of divide and conquer, it's fairly elementary. It's not that complicated. It's simple math.
Hmm.
It's divide and conquer, fairly simple math. It's not high level. It's just, it's division and subtraction and multiplication. It's not, it's basic mathematics. You see what I'm trying to say?
I do. What do you feel
Uh,
like? Because the phrase, the word manipulation is coming into my mind now. So what do you feel like it is that keeps, I mean, I know we have the indoctrination and we have the media spewing crap at us nonstop on all fronts. I mean, like it's TVs, it's phones, it's radios, it's everything. And
yeah.
there are so many people waking up to the manipulation. What is it you feel keeps the people who aren't aware of it unaware of it?
Goes back to the school and levels of awareness, levels of see, like when you get into this discussion of soul, most people would generally agree there's old souls and young souls.
Yes.
Once you get into that soul conversation, you get past all the gaga soul consciousness, and you get into a more sober notion that we embody we are souls and we embody on the planet at different levels of our soul development.
Hmm.
Basically, it goes at the deeper level like this. You might say the soul in non-duality is a very in communion with source.
Yes.
But as we study metaphysics, when you study the science of spirituality, you realize that there's this aspect of the soul that's in duality, but that duality is not just empirical 3D duality. We're talking about duality on interdimensional planes. Okay, it's important to understand that interdimensional planes are duality. So if a channeler is channeling an entity, they're channeling in duality.
Hmm.
Even if it's an angel or an archangel, there's still the archangels even are a feature of interdimensional duality. You see, non-duality is there's no angels, there's no us, there's no them. It's just oneness. It's this notion of it's like a God pool of oneness. Okay, so the study of metaphysics and multidimensionality operates on what Plato talked about it as what's called the archetypal blueprint. Okay, the archetypal blueprint in duality is the blueprint of the design of the universe, the design, the way that there's planets and they're from the like the molecular atomic level shows cyclical movement.
Hmm.
Okay, it's very like little mini solar systems,
Yeah.
and then on the cosmic, it's everything's moving, spinning. Everything's in motion in duality. Motion is a key word. Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, the blueprint is there. What am okay? I don't mean to digress. I just wanted to give a little background to this idea of soul. Now, all of duality, when we understand it well, can be basically understood in one word: mind. The soul, you and I in duality on our soul level can be understood as soul mind. Okay, mind. Once you get into mind, you realize now that the evolutionary dynamic of the soul in the manifest plane, like Earth as school, goes through cyclic processes of growth and development. So their mind is not well developed. Like in other words, they can have a high, like a child in elementary school right now can have a higher IQ than you and I,
Right.
but they don't have awareness of many things.
Right.
High IQ, but not a lot of awareness. Not an IQ, by the way, is not the same as what generally is referred to as EQ, which is more intuitive. Obviously, there's IQ, which is, intelligence quotient, right?
Right.
Then there's what's come to be known as EQ, emotional intelligence, which is empathy. That's
Right.
a okay kind of intelligence. But then there's intuitive intelligence. That's a whole different conversation yet. They're
Yeah.
not the same. Okay. So a person can have a high IQ but low intuition. That's very important to understand. Once you understand that kind of thinking, it's no longer assumption. So what that all means is that not everybody has the capacity for a variety of reasons. It could be their soul level development. It could be their conditioning.
Hmm.
Conditioning. Okay. And it goes on like that because the way that the human mind works with perception and interpretation is it unless you really develop a stronger self-reflective awareness, which we call creative critical thinking about how you're thinking, why you're thinking, what you're thinking, how, why, how and why are you thinking what you're thinking? But the tendency is to assume that they're thinking objectively,
Right.
but they are not thinking. Okay, so until, as I said last time, when you realize that you don't see reality as it is, then you see reality as it is. So, in other words, the common assumption is that they're seeing reality as it is, not connecting the dots that they've been conditioned to think that way.
Right.
And they're because intuition, the key word is intuition, which is not the same as instinct. It's a
No,
very different
definitely.
thing.
Very different.
Very. Instinct is gut brain. Intuition is heart brain. And reason is head brain. Head brain, reason. Heart brain, intuition, gut brain, instinct. The tendency is to live by instinct and reason, but not heart, not intuition.
Right.
Okay, so spiritual science, by the way, is the science. One of the ways you can describe spiritual science, it's the science of intuition. If
Yeah.
you can develop your, but they're not intuitive at the level in which they can see through the conditioning. That's why. That's why. See?
Yeah.
So they're exposed to the media and to others, but they're operating on instinct and reason, but not intuition. That's what I would basically describe as the issue. And the pineal, probably when you get into the heart chakra, what would be called the intuitive brain, is gotta invariably be a part of, in a funny sort of way, the brain.
Hmm.
Like like although the heart brain in a way is its own thing,
Yeah.
it's still part of the whole embodiment, right?
Yes.
So when you get into the heart brain, because the even like it gets into little bit of a complicated conversation that I don't pretend to fully understand. But what I'm trying to say is when you get into the glandular system like the pineal,
Hmm.
it's bound to be connected to the intuition.
Yeah.
The danger, I think, though, is if you try and access the intuition through the pineal, that is not what I would call the way to do it. I
Right.
would say access the pineal through the intuition.
Yeah.
I would reverse it.
Right.
Like in other words, a lot of people will say, I've heard it out there. There's one woman selling it that the third eye is your intuitive center. It's like wrong. That's called your insight center. Insight is not intuition. You can have
Right.
insight, but not intuition.
Right.
Imagine you can be quite brilliant in your insight, but not be as intuitive. So intuition is this what I deem to be the special thing that we all need to be focused on, by
Yes.
the way. Because intuition is, see, into reason why is because intuition is linked to your, this is important. Brain is not mind. Mind is your field. So just like your computer, brain, but internet, mind.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So the computer not online these days is almost like an imbecile. A relative, like if you have a computer that's not online, it's kind of like an imbecile, isn't it?
Yeah.
Think like, okay, you can do things with it,
Yes.
but you're extremely like, okay, so it's a brain without a mind.
Yeah.
See that? So I don't mean to insult anybody when I say that. I just want to make a kind of a point that the
Yeah.
brain without the mind. Okay, so the intuition, the heart chakra accesses the mind, but people, what they're doing is they're not accessing their mind at the level that they could. So they're operating more in their brain, and they're operating from what's called there's a loop between their gut brain, instinct survival, and their head brain, rationale. So they rationalize instinct survival reaction and bypass. intuition.
Yeah.
That's what I would call, that's what I would call spirit. That's the most important spiritual bypass of all. Like people talk about spiritual bypass. You've heard that?
I don't think I have heard that term before.
Spiritual bypass is kind of like blaming and projecting, um, like not taking responsibility for the work you need to do to confront your ignorance, your shadow, your darkness, your
Oh,
prejudice, your fear. Okay,
yeah.
so like a part of the spiritual path is to be willing to be courageous enough to see yourself and to confront your fear, bias,
Yeah.
prejudice. Okay, that's called spiritual warrior work.
Yeah.
Okay,
It
okay.
takes a lot of
But
what my dad
that
would
that
refer to as intestinal fortitude to
or it's
to
well,
take a
there
look at
it
that
you know,
deeply.
there you yes, that's a very nice way of saying it. Yes, they can work together, head, heart, and gut. And the head and the gut can help the heart a lot
Yes.
to have resolve, etc. But you have to be aware that you're not operating through that intuition. So
Yeah.
it's like a paradigm of realization that's not commonly grasped.
Yeah.
So people will often operate on their gut, which is sentimental, and then the head, which is rationalizing. So they're rationalizing their sentimentality.
Yeah.
Neither one of those is intuition.
Right.
So these are things I've observed, and I've come to these perspectives from the study of astrology, by the way. By studying astrology closely, how and why it works, and observing people, and doing the charts of old souls, and I can see what is showing up in their chart, by the way.
Yeah.
Some astrologers, like I was talking to a group of astrologers some point years ago, and it was a bit of a strong statement, but she says, you can't see the soul level in a chart. And I looked at her, I said, no, you can't, but it can be seen. It
Yeah.
can. I think it would be important to be humble to some extent, but it can be seen. And
Hmm.
it's a very fine art. It's a very fine art to do it. And what's the point anyway? But still, it can be if one studies the charts of old souls, which are fairly obviously there. Wise people who have shared a lot of great wisdom and usually are somewhat renowned for it, but not always.
Right.
Sometimes they're not,
Right.
right? So, you do and you go, what's the common denominator in these charts? And you start to see it, by the way. And I'm not going to get into what it is, but it is of course based on the specific placement of certain planets, and usually it's the far planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in particular, which are very specifically kind of placed, and they can be in various ways. But anyway, I digress a little bit. Coming back full circle, I'm sorry, I went on this little kind of long-winded bit, but
I
I just wanted
love
to come right back to what you said. It comes back to the problem is people are disconnected from their heart chakra. That's the nutshell statement right there.
Yeah.
And if you can keep people in their instinct and reason, they're running like on a treadmill,
Yeah.
and they think clearly, and they're just going about their day, but they don't realize they can be good people, nice people, smart people, high IQs,
Yeah.
even a high EQ. You can have a high IQ and a high EQ, but that does not mean you're accessing your intuition at the level that you could possibly.
Hmm.
Okay. And in intuition, because it's connected to our mind, the key word is it has access to knowing. Generally, it's a vague kind of term, knowing.
Yeah.
Knowing means things, quite frankly, you in your exploration and celebration and journey of eh, interviewing and podcasting, for example, but also your orientation to listen to all these different people,
Yeah.
right, are working your intuition.
Yes.
You're working, your intuition knows, and now you're feeding it. Doom, 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 doom. I mean, we can feed the problem, ironically, it's kind of goes on and on like this, but if we can, the danger a bit is if you can feed, like the intuition can be awakened, but we can continue to feed our head rational mind without realizing we're like the intuition needs more attention.
Mm-hmm.
Like you, okay, it's needs more attention. People who are like in religious, like they love God or they love Jesus or they love Buddha or they love, that's not intuition.
Right.
That's that's called the gut brain. They're kind of in sentimental love.
Yeah.
Okay. And
They're
and
still
and
putting the
unfortunately,
emphasis on what's outside of them, and Steve and I have talked about this, like people that are really, really religious and they have all this belief, they say, in this book they're studying, but they're not living into that. So to me, that's not actual belief in it because you're still looking to the outside when everything is right here. And if you were really believing that, then everything would be, you would be the co-creator instead of feeling like you've got to sit there and do nothing while someone answers your prayers, you know?
basically, yes, I would agree with that. Yes. So that's kind of in a summarized statement. That's where we're at. Humanity's at this place where we've arrived at this crucible moment, this crucial moment when we need more than ever to awaken our heart chakra,
Yeah.
our heart center, knowing the difference between the heart as sentimental versus the heart that's accessing knowing. And it's a very subtle thing.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, but it's just worth considering that intuition is the key to, it always has been. And the intuition is linked to, I call it the communion center, the communion, heart, love, inclusion, communion.
Hmm.
All of those words, intuition, inclusion, communion, access, unity, all those words are share in the same center, the
Yeah.
same one. So if you have it, if you have, the person's intuitive because they're inclusive. That's it. Right now. Soon as it's exclusive, you go, they're in their head.
Yeah.
You don't even have to be that smart to be intuitive. You can be less IQ, but you're intuitive. So the person with a super high IQ and a very high intelligence is in exclusivity.
Hmm.
Imagine
Yeah.
that's part of the riddle of our times. We've kind of come to a place where these people who are very bright, high IQ types, very scientific, but they're not accessing their intuition. So they've put themselves in a box of rules.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
They've
such a
taken and they've
beautiful
taken
thing
it.
to me when those things collide. Because some of the people that I listen to, like I'm just going to throw out a couple names, Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden, for instance. They're so
Okay.
intelligent. They have done all this research and all of these things, but they are also very heart-centered people. And you can tell it in the way they talk. I mean, it's
I
amazing.
would place them right there. You said it. I would agree with you. They're a very good example, positively speaking, of the bridge. They're kind of contributing to building a bridge to the intuitive heart center. I have listened to them. I've noticed them get myself a tad sentimental, a tad emotional, a tad exclusive on occasion. I've sorry to say that I'm pretty picky. I've noticed I'm like, because I'm kind of a vigilant auditory communicator.
Mhm.
Like I'm listening very carefully for their paradigm and I'm listening for inclusion. But I will say they certainly are among the ones in the world that I'm aware of, as you are. that they're definitely busy building the bridge. So
Yeah.
their heart is right there. And of course, they're both accomplished and celebrated, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I've just noticed here and there a little ooh. I thought, you should know that intuitively. I thought to myself on
Yeah.
occasion, you should, if you were intuitively clear, you would know that. So what's the problem? So it's just, I guess, it's just the way it is.
Do you feel
There's
like
different levels of it.
there is, and I agree with that. Do you feel like it may be related to the busyness of life sometimes that you get kind
Oh,
of
sure.
thrown off course not a lot, but just a little bit enough to make it where you wouldn't be fully in your heart space in that moment?
For sure. I think, like spiritual mastery is to be anchored in your heart chakra. Anchored. You're just absolutely anchored. That's what's called spiritual mastery. But the tendency is that until we develop that mastery, which is no small thing to say you've achieved,
Right.
okay, you're kind of in bouncing around to your head and gut brain, which is just the way it is. It's no judgment. And, I don't pretend myself to have absolutely mastered the heart chakra anchor. So we all invariably will bounce around between our fight or flight, freeze, and so forth, instinct driven rationale,
Right.
which I was suggesting. I actually wrote an article on this. It was about uh, there's like a loop between the rationale and the gut, but it doesn't hit the heart. So I created a few articles on that. The one that like one was the diagnostic of the issue, okay, where they're not connecting to the heart because the head and gut are in control.
Hmm.
That's kind of a form of lower mind ego, by the way. Uh, Heart being the mark of higher mind. So I anecdotally created this little meditation, and it's called Cross My Heart. I am whole and balanced. So it's a kind of literally physical, but also, like visualization is what I mean, where
Hmm.
you're crossing, where the goal is to cross the head and the heart. Sorry, the head and the gut in the heart. So it creates, like, it's actually beautifully illustrated as a figure eight.
I was
See
just
that?
thinking that when you were describing it, I thought that's a infinity symbol is what I was actually thinking, not eight, but yeah.
It's linked to the number eight, which is very valid. It's, by the way, the number eight is very much the number of the game of power. Like, okay, so the number eight numerologically is the number of power linked to uh, it's generally referred to as power and abundance, but that's a superficial understanding. Eight is the driving force of power. Okay, but just what we're saying, when eight is in its highest vibration, it simply is oriented to empower. So it kind of goes like, it's kind of a metaphor. It's kind of a nice way. As I'm saying that to, I'm kind of realizing that empire is the opposite of empower. Empire is almost inevitably what's happened throughout history. Dynasties, empires, the American Empire, the British Empire, the Chinese Empire, whatever, right?
Hmm.
It kind of got it over the history, it kind of got lodged into nationality, nations.
Yeah.
So prior to that, it was conquered the other nations to create an empire, right?
Right.
Whether it was the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the Turkish Empire, and I'm sure all kinds of empires.
Yes.
But so interestingly enough, empire versus empower. And you can go on and on. It's almost funny to say this, but it's like empire, vampire, almost, just to play
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
Empire vampire wants to take your blood,
Yeah.
literally and figuratively. But where empower is you're in unity consciousness, you're in inclusion, you're in celebration of differences. It
Yeah.
becomes like a wonderful world of, yes, perceptions and interpretations,
Hmm.
but without, we're no longer afraid
Yeah.
that, you know, they're in that classroom learning that. But it's a little bit idealistic though, because of the way the game boards, at least currently, it's a bit idealistic because that level of acceptance, inclusion, communion is something we have yet, it's not as it's not exactly on our doorstep.
Yeah, and I
It's
feel
a
like it's a there's as you were talking, I was thinking there's no sense of competition there. There's no sense of
no,
if you're doing well, then that minimizes me in some way, that there's not enough for all of us. And I really strongly believe that there's enough, and I used to listen to Wayne Dyer all the time, and he talks to the
yeah,
ocean of abundance and how there's so much in the ocean of abundance. There's enough for all of us without feeling like we're taking away from someone else or someone else is taking away from us by their having their success and their dreams come true. So
yes,
I
yes.
love
Part of the
to
little bit
empower
of
people.
Sure, I see that. Good for you. Because every in doing it, you're feeding your own heart. It's a nice way of saying it. You're evolving by it. That's the key. Once you get into that heart chakra, unity, inclusion, community, etc., your evolution's accelerated. You're now on the truly on the what would be truly the path in the generic spiritual sense.
Mhm.
Now you're really on the path. The little thing gets a little tricky with everything, and I really like Wayne Dyer and all these wonderful minds and people making these sincere, contributions, etc. The funny little tricky bit is in the game of life, on the game board, just like in the terrain of the planet, it needs to be not flat, not all one, not we all have access to endless supply, which is
Right.
a nice thought. Okay, which okay, and the thought that people right now in the world are starving is one of the most horrible thoughts we have to contend with. It's a really difficult one to embrace, right? But the point partially is that empowering each other is important, but we need to let the game board have many levels still. It's
Yeah.
kind of a tricky statement I would offer. There
Yeah.
needs to be reason to aspire. You need there needs to be reason to exercise resolve and to be committed and to be gritty, if you like.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't for, so this is a bit of a, not at the risk of contradiction, the game board requires, believe it or not, opposition and competition.
Sure.
Like they're right.
Yeah.
So it's because
Absolutely.
we need to, because yeah, climbing the mountain or in a, modern day sports very, very positively uh posits skill against team skill. And it's kind of a fun thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yes, somebody's going to walk away. One team is going to walk away with the cup, right?
Hmm.
But it needs to be that way to some extent, right? So it just throws in a little non. It's a bit of a paradox in it all. But we've kind of the thing that we've arrived at though is, and it goes back to what we were saying, is that we're at a very complex place because there's literally evidence of poison in the food.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
I mean, the truth is, I will say this generally, currently at least, from what I can tell, like the nature is abundant. So, like, it's ironic to say this, but medicine, for example, comes from weeds,
Hmm.
and weeds are everywhere.
Yeah.
So like you can do your best you can lock people up into little cities or like 15-minute cities. You can lock them up, but what does it amount to what does it mean when suddenly people can't go outside of very restrictive places? What does that mean to people? Like, what does this mean? It
Right.
means somebody's controlling it. Why would they not let them have access to the plants, for
Right.
example? Goes on like that. The
Yeah.
weeds are the medicine. And so it kind of it is, the weeds and or the plants, of course, are the food. So in other words, is just basically another way of saying it is lack is manufactured. There is no lack.
Right.
Just what Wayne Dyer was saying, there is no lack.
Yeah.
There's no lack. There's only politics of power, and they manufacture lack. Or if the insanity is strong enough, they'll poison the food.
Hmm.
So in other words, what we're talking about is what you are indirect, what you're sharing, the way I interpret it is the clear evidence that we've arrived at a very critical point is right in front of us,
Oh, it is.
right?
Yeah.
Right in front of us. And here we are. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And I would say this, if I were to offer an anecdote, aside from self-reflective awareness, which astrology and numerology, for example, can really do a good job. Numerology and astrology are wonderful tools unless the person's only focused on predicting for the other person. That's the garbage kind of astrology and numerology. The best kind is the kind that helps the person know who they are.
Yeah.
Then, because once they have that, and that's the kind of astrology that activates their heart chakra. But basically speaking, the antidote to the problem really is it's not a new thing to say, but it's the heart chakra, but not, well, sorry, when I say that, the heart chakra, the problem is we have basically arrived after eons of manipulation and empire and control. The attachment to winning has caused certain groups of whomever they are, somebody's doing it,
Hmm.
somebody's decided to poison the food, say,
Yeah.
has arrived at the epitome of insanity, right? So,
Yeah.
and the anecdote really, we just, has been said many times in songs and everything. The only difference when they say we need to get back to the heart, the only qualified difference I would say is you need to get back to the heart chakra, which is, see, what they often mean is sentimental heart.
Right.
It's really important to understand that the heart chakra is not sentimental. It's a really interesting statement to make. It's not sentimental. It's exceedingly inclusive, but it's not, oh, I love you, but I don't really like her.
You
You
know,
see what sentimental is?
yeah, it's so interesting you said that because I actually won a reading with a lady who channels all that is, and we had our session the other night. And one of the things that she said to me, she goes, um, you know how you protect your heart. And I was like, because she said, I'm very heart centered, is what she said. And she said, you know how you protect your heart. And I was like, I don't really think about it. I just always assume that I walk in my power and I am protected because of that. So I never really gave it thought to that specific thing. And she goes, it's you keep it wide open. That's how you protect it. You just keep it wide open. And I thought about that quite a bit, is how it's just when you're in your real heart chakra, like you said, and you're wide open, then you don't really have to fear anything because there's none, it doesn't really exist there, does it?
I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you something that I don't agree with that entirely.
Okay.
Um, sorry. Just the way let's put it this way. The way I'm going to see is very similar to but walking around the world with your heart wide open is not wise.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be centered in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a very different thing. Like if you have your heart chakra wide open, it's like exposing your all your passwords, if you like. It's a funny thing, like in the duality, it's a bit of a game. So while I think in principle there she's trying to make a point that I think is relevant, my distinction personally is that going through life heart centered is sort of different than going through life heart open.
Okay.
So, so for what that's worth, I know it's a bit picky. Sorry about that. It's a bit of a picky thing. I forgot I had that in my pocket. So I say that with humility and respect, but just seeing if you're centered there, you have access. See, the heart chakra isn't just about it's communion, yes, okay, but what it means is that you got to get in to get out. So it's like if you're centered, you have access to source.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But if you're open, everything has access to you.
Yeah.
That is not necessary. Okay, you got to be careful. I might
Right.
encourage that. So, in principle, I totally get. I agree with her. You are, in my language, a heart-centered person. You are, awake and aware and sincere and, willing and determined to and committed to participate in this awakening process, right?
Yes,
That to
absolutely.
me that to me is all heart centered. So um so there you go.
Well, I
What can I
think that's
say?
a
But
really important distinction to make. And maybe that's what she meant, but didn't use those exact words just to, I don't know, state, yeah,
well, if she knew what she was talking about, she wouldn't have said that, which means I'm kind of inclined to think she wasn't quite knowing what she's talking about quite. It's the thing is where I know that sounds bad, but it's a little bit like that. It's like, no, if you say wide open, it's wrong. It's the language is like it's kind of it's not it's kind of like what science has rules. In a way it's a valid statement, okay, but
yeah,
it's kind of like there's a certain in so anyway, I won't say more. That's my view on it. I think that in my view, I've thought about it many times of the years, and we've like if those who study chakras, they'll say no, you don't want your chakras wide open, but you do want them all operating.
right.
Okay, there's a difference. Okay, yeah. They will talk about you have to, psychic self-defense, for example, and it's what she was saying. So she's on the right track there, I would say. If you live what basically the phrase is, if you live in, through, and from your heart,
Hmm.
you then are what you said, protected. You're secure.
Right,
It does not mean you're not going to die. It does
right,
not mean you're not going to die.
right,
Yeah, but it means that you're not identified with your temporary personality embodiment stronger than you are identified with your soul.
yeah,
So the in, through, and from the heart, the reason that phrase is so important is because the heart chakra is the access to the soul. But the soul is accessed through the heart chakra, but the mind is different in a way than the soul access. It's kind of a bit of a paradox. The soul access is like source, but the mind is actually duality. It's a bit of a tricky thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see, the mind is a radar. It's like the mind is dualistic, like right and left brain, if you like, male and female, yin and yang.
Yeah.
Mind means the dynamic of this. Okay. But the whole idea of the heart chakra as source access means you're accessing non-duality. When channels channel, they're not accessing non-duality. They're accessing the astral dimension.
Hmm.
Like a channeling is not accessing God. You're accessing the mind field. So like even the angels live in the mind field of God. So it doesn't mean they're not accessing high levels, okay? And it doesn't mean that's not good as such. But channeling itself is not spirituality.
That's so
It's not like
interesting.
spirituality is not channeling. Channeling, that's a technique of accessing dimensions, which is kind of it's an aspect of metaphysical science, by the way.
Hmm.
But spirituality is the science of the heart chakra, and all the chakras. But I'll say that with a certain confidence. But yeah, so in other words, spiritual master teachers, they will not encourage you to channel, by the way. They
It's so
don't.
interesting that you said that because I feel like that explains so much why most channels, when I see videos come across, I can't even finish watching them. I mean, I've even like this sounds
Yes,
awful,
because
but there's been several of them where I've shut them off and I'm like, oh my God, you're so full of crap. I can't even listen to you anymore, and I'll shut it off. And so I feel like, and I don't feel like I'm being judgmental in that way. I just feel like it's a lack of resonance with my soul. Honestly, I feel like the information is just like ricocheting off of my soul and my soul's going, I feel like that's more what it is than anything. So,
basically, that's right. Like, and again, I don't want to discredit or criticize or judge people who channel because it's its own kind of ability.
it is
Okay. The danger
absolutely.
at worst, yes. And the danger at worst is who and what are you channeling exactly? And are you sure? Because you see, the astral dimension, if you understand it well, one studies that level of spiritual science, you realize the astral dimension is a realm of imagination and it's full of trickery.
Hmm.
It's full of illusion. So
Yeah.
the danger is that a channel might be channeling entities who claim to be archangels, but they're not. So they see, the funny thing is, you can be you can be not in the physical, you can be in the inner dimensions in your mind. Okay, they're living in their mind body. They're what be okay. I don't Their astral body. They can have illusions of grandeur.
Yeah.
The Bible, like even like I'm the archangel. I'm like, wow, really? So they would like an archangel, for example, would be have you can imagine super high energy.
Yeah.
Does the channel have the capacity to channel that, or are they channeling a relative illusion? Like so, it's kind of tricky territory.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of it gets into tricky territory. Like psychics often are mind readers. They're not, there's a difference between psychic versus seers or highly developed clairvoyance. They're slightly different words.
Hmm.
Okay. So there's all these different categories. So yeah, it's kind of like, oh, easy. I channel now. Oh, wow. Now you have a horde of people following you. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, it's there be more. I would generally venture more often than not, they're accessing illusions or at least relative. That's why the greater spiritual teachers do not support channeling. They're partially concerned because the access goes both ways, that they're concerned about relative degrees of possession.
Yeah, interesting. So there's a couple things that came up for me while you were chatting about that. And one is I feel like it's a catchphrase, I feel like it's the cool thing to do right now for a lot of people. I'm not saying that not everyone is falling under what I just said. I feel like there are some people who are very genuine. I really truly do.
Mhm.
And the
For
second
sure.
thing is
Absolutely.
to your point about the archangels being very high energy. I actually had my own experience with an archangel. It was Uriel, and I did not channel Uriel.
All
That's
right.
not what happened. What happened was
Sure.
Uriel came to me, and I wasn't even looking at him. He came and stood to my right, and I couldn't even just capture it and just talking about it. Holy crap. The amount of love that I felt,
Mhm.
I couldn't even look at him.
Lovely.
He just was there.
Yeah,
And I'm sure not even
sure.
in his full power, but I was like
It probably
bawling.
wouldn't.
I mean, these big fat
Yeah,
tears are
yeah.
just falling in my lap. And I was like, holy crap. I couldn't, well, you see how it affects me just, and he's not even here right this. I mean, he might be, but in a very like, but yeah, when that
Well,
happened,
it's a
it's just
beautiful thing.
incredible.
Wow. Very beautiful. I would offer you this consideration, okay, that in the deeper unity of things, all the archangels, are kind of like one. They're just facets of the same one thing.
Yeah.
Okay, like those, so it's not like Uriel or Michael or Raphael. They're not separate, like they're different facets of the same whole, I would offer. Okay, everything's holistic. Everything. Okay. Secondly, this is going to sound a little strange, but we are them and they are us. It's not
Yeah.
like that they're them and we're us. It's not quite like that. I don't think in duality there's a semblance of that. So it's a little tricky, but in the ultimate sense, they're the archangels are the features of the design of the duality universe, which again is not just the manifest universe in all the galaxies, it's the multi-dimensional universe. And the archangels are aspects of the blueprint, the building block. That's why they call them archangels, and that's why we use the word archetypes.
Mhm.
See, the archangels are the master builder aspects of God that are involved in the not just the creation. This is an interesting statement to make. Not just the create like the blueprint, not just the blueprint of the entire manifest universe, but the sustaining of it.
Mhm.
They're like aspects of the driving unit, that they're core features of what makes it keep going. So when you say what you said, there's an old saying, by the way, which is interesting, and I don't want to, it's not for a moment doubting, because duality, like it's all full of paradoxes. So
Yeah.
you having access, a vibrational uh, um, access of Uriel, I'm not here to doubt that. I'm sure, and you know what you experienced, so I'm not here to say that's not true, okay? And other people too having their own mystical experiences. But another interesting way of saying it ever so slightly, this is where I'm going with all this. There's an old saying that says if you were to be able to behold your own soul, you would hit the ground sobbing, because the power of your own soul would be overwhelmingly, like, beyond what we can usually imagine as beautiful and and great. But so the soul, that soul I'm referring to in its pure expression, shall we say, for lack of better words. But the problem, by the way, just to come full circle with this, is that there's no such thing as a dark soul, but there's definitely such thing as a dark mind.
Mhm.
Mind. It's the mind of the soul that's in dualistic engagement, that aspect of our soul. Like, in other words, our soul's mind is what I generally refer to as the deep subconscious mind, which, if you go deep enough, becomes the collective unconscious, as Carl Jung says, right? So
Right.
you go into this deep subconscious mind, and so this it kind of comes full circle back to what we said right at the beginning. We were talking about, the human condition and the plight of the world, and we're at this very critical juncture.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the, in the most inclusive way of saying it, aspects of us, that like aspects of the human collective mind is dark.
Yeah.
So humanity as a whole has cancer. That's what we have. We have cancer. Like spiritually, we spiritually have like a cancer in us. And the thing is, though, this is not a cancer that source will let us die from. It says you're going to heal this as long as it takes.
Yeah.
It's like it kind of, you see, it says you, and so we could say insanity, we could say insan, but but cancer in a way is almost like insane. If you, I don't really pretend to understand cancer exactly, but
I
I do
get
get
it.
it's the
That
body, it's the body attacking itself.
right.
Okay,
It
basically.
is.
So that's where, right? You
Yeah.
appreciate that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we're at that, like, just a metaphorical way of saying humanity has cancer. I don't mean that literally.
Right.
I mean that we've arrived at a place where it's not so much a question of, like, historically, people fought the neighbors all the time.
Yeah.
The next culture over there,
The Hatfield and the
okay, right.
McCoys and that
Now
kind of thing.
all the above, the Spartans and the Trojans, and it goes on and on and on and on. And yes, at every level, you got it. And umpire, vampire. But we've arrived at a point where the enemy is no longer located somewhere.
Mhm.
It's like it's become everywhere in a way.
Yeah.
It's like it's in the media of all the world. It's in the food of all the world.
Yeah.
It's that kind. So we're at this really, and you kind of we all, and it's kind of an insanity. But they think, I think, whoever it is, whatever it is, I don't really at this. It's kind of a question mark. Well, what you know? I basically believe this is that the way to heal it is through the heart chakra center
Yeah.
specifically as the go-to, but stepping stones along the way to, like, heart. By the way, a little aside very quickly is that part of the feature of the heart chakra state is the capacity for self-honesty. Remember we talked about the inner, like your father said, intestinal fortitude.
Yes.
Good, great phrase, but great phrase. Guts, eh? You
Yes.
got to get your gut. Okay, that guy's guts, meaning courage, right? And
Yeah.
okay, intestinal fortitude to be self-honest, but most people don't really, they can, like, let's put it this way. there's different levels of self-honesty and there's different levels of self-awareness,
Yes.
right? And so in the way this game board's designed, we're all going to experience various degrees of self-awareness and various degrees of self-honesty.
Hmm.
It's going to be like a thing. But because people lack awareness, they think, oh, I know myself. And I'm like, it's a very unsophisticated self-awareness that I think a lot of people have. It's not very sophisticated, not very objective. It's very, I know what I do, where I live, what my name is, what I like to eat, kind of, I know my own mind. Okay, fair enough, right?
Right.
But if you get into yeah. So if you get into a slightly more sophisticated perspective on self-awareness, okay, now this is where I must admit astrology, numerology can, not necessarily, depends on how it's done, can really help that, or all kinds of other tools too. That's what these tools are for at best. They give you insight into self-awareness.
Right.
No, and again, more mainstream negative expression of these tools is prediction, prediction, prediction.
Yes.
It's like, wow, it's like I call that, it's kind of like the fast food of metaphysics. People want to go, oh, to a psychic or an astrologer to get a prediction. It's like, don't come to me if that's what you want, because it's like, you're just after fast food sensation.
Hmm.
But if you really want to kind of dive into a deeper process of coming to know who you are, like to increase your self-awareness using these sophisticated tools in a sophisticated way, that's what I would, okay, then they're going to increase your capacity for self-honesty. It doesn't have to go that way. You don't have to do it that way. But see, a person aspiring to self-honesty without the sophisticated tool is fine, but they're lost in a world without seeing at more objectively. That's the problem. There's a lack. What's so beautiful about the tools of astrology, by the way, is it's not self-honesty and self-awareness to kind of recognize all your weaknesses. It's not like that. No, it's actually trying to show you more fully what your strengths and your purpose are.
Right.
And if you have a clarity, if that can be clarified, quite frankly, what'll happen is a lot of confusion will be gone. It will,
Right.
like, so what people are doing without realizing it is they're operating at lower levels of awareness, which can be described as relative degrees of confusion.
Hmm.
When they're confused, they're afraid.
Yes.
See how it all works? Yes. The little bit of confusion makes a person nervous.
Yeah.
But people are so used to being confused, and I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not trying, like, I know that it's a relative thing.
Right.
Okay. It's not, I'm not saying that that source is causing the confusion. It's like we have to be self-responsible, if you like, to realize that we're, as human beings, susceptible to confusion and to recognize. But that what's not understood is that they're like the modus operandi operates on lower levels of awareness of self,
Hmm.
and that's see the issue. And so it's kind of a little bit of a story. Like I'm bringing in the astrology and numerology means of getting a person into their self-awareness, which is connected to their truth,
Yeah.
so, like which is not the truth, but it's their truth,
Yes.
which requires self-honesty. And both of them, and this is an interesting kind of final kind of loop back, okay? Heart-centered awareness is deep access to self-honesty and personal truth. That's exactly self
Be true.
heart-centered aware access is the access to self-honesty and personal truth. Okay. So it's a really interesting thing to say. And what it does is it act when it gets stronger, it starts to minimize, I think, the degree to which you project, and this is the one of the bigger words, assume.
Mhm.
Assume. People are assuming things immensely.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
projecting and assuming, projecting, assuming, projecting, assuming, projecting, assuming, projecting.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I know who you are. It's like, you do not know who I am really. You
Right.
just have a superficial projection of assumption. I see this quite a bit. Even people who are both quite intelligent people, people who have been on spiritual paths all their life, meditators, they still, in my view, lack a fairly more sophisticated level of self-awareness and self-honesty. So they're in assumption and projection and they don't know it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a bit of a vigilant statement to make, and it's not like a big judgment, but it's really something to consider. So that's why I'm dedicated to these tools as means, but in the way that they're used, which is my bias, that I'm what's called a humanistic astrologer, which would also apply to numerology. I'm a humanistic numerologist, meaning I'm more interested. There is an element in both of them and how I do what I do, which is looking at the future and, directions and probabilities and possibilities. So it's not like that's not involved, but it's just not some hard outcome predicted focus.
Right.
This is what's going to happen. So that's the when
Yeah.
people want, tell me what's going to happen, they want to be relieved of the responsibility of the journey of co-creating
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. They want
See
an
that?
outline. And so
So
if they do those bullet point things, then they're going to create what they think they want, which may not even be actually what's the best thing for them. So that's really interesting.
for example, for example, yes. So that's at least the yes, exactly. Thank you. It's kind of the intention of it. The core intention with the work. And if, as a teacher of these subjects, that's how I teach as well, to help them A, understand, to know how and why it works, and B, then to work with it as a sophisticated tool that is presented in a deep, deep respect to the person they're working with recognition that their soul
Yeah.
incarnate. That's at the core of it, and to recognize that the journey of awakening and self-awareness is a process.
Hmm.
It's not I had people will say, oh, I had a reading once. I'm like, that's like saying you had lunch once to me. It's like, or it's like saying I went to the gym one, like I exercised once.
Yeah. Walked out of that
I'm
gym
like,
really buff.
yeah, yeah, wow, I could see that really working for you. You see, so that type of superficiality is there, but it's kind of been described, of course, as matrix mind, and it goes on and on.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
it's yeah, kind of it's sort of a never-ending conversation, but
So let me ask
it
you
comes
something.
down.
I know we talked about the world having kind of the spiritual cancer, and you said it will heal as long as it takes. And you being the astrologer that you are and working with numerology and all that, is there a probability on the table of how long that's going to take for us to get our act together, so
Great,
to speak?
great question. Great. Um, astrologically, you can look at it and begin to ascertain what that probability would be. It's a little complicated because there's a lot of overlapping cycles. What I would say is it's already happening, first of all. I think you, others were breaking free of boxes and uh, assumptions,
Yes.
matrix assumptions. If you're in the matrix, even if you're a meditator, even if you've studied well, high IQ, you can still be in the matrix. It's really thing. It's something I've observed quite a bit. And it's like, wow, I'm almost surprised. But at the same time, I just go, okay, well, that's who they are, where they're at, and it's all good.
Yep.
And, I respectfully, go about my business and leave them to theirs kind of thing,
Yeah.
type of thing, but sorry, don't mean to evade the question. First of all, I do believe it's already happening. So the awakening and the alternative health movement, okay, has been here, and we can go back to the 70s and stuff like that to see where it really began. And that's what gave rise when the Surgeon General, I believe, in the United States, if I'm not mistaken, said we declare that we cannot beat cancer, and it opened the doors to the alternative healing movement,
Hmm.
which which has definitely grown and it continues to grow, positively speaking. So that's good. If I were to give you an answer to that, I think when I think of it astrologically, I think in the shortest term, it's going to take about 50 or 60 years.
Really.
That's kind of the thing is, yeah, you see, the thing is that that would be the short term, I think, honestly. I think it's more in the arena of centuries. And that
Yeah.
may sound a tad cynical. A lot of people don't want to hear that. They don't, okay, and I'm just saying this theoretically, but the human condition is not at a very advanced level, even though human technology is.
Right.
So it's like Greg Davis said that well. He says our technology is more advanced than than our emotion. He would say our emotional, his language in my understanding, but I would call it, it's the human condition is not well established in its heart chakra. It's caught and in a loop of survival and rationalization kind of thing.
Yeah.
The human condition will take a while to and be progressive. Uh, so when we say humanity has cancer and it's attacking itself, okay, it's the way I'm trying to say it. I don't
Yeah.
think it. I think what will happen though, I think that sooner than that, there will be forces that will try and put a container on it.
Hmm.
And these are, it gets tricky here because I do, to some extent, bring attention to what's called prophecy astrology,
Hmm.
prophecy, like Nostradamus,
Yes.
prophecy astrology. But it's a kind of a bit of an indulgence for me, although I do touch it. I'm more personal evolutionary process. Um, it's personal because maybe perhaps one day in the future I'll work with entire groups. Who knows, right? I don't know if that's going to happen in this lifetime. I do already teach groups of people, but like I'm not taking the role of like actively being the spiritual guru for a whole bunch of people, right?
Hmm.
Who knows? Maybe that will happen, but it's kind of like I feel that the work of bringing the deeper, sophisticated appreciation of the tools I use is more important for me, kind of thing. Like in other words, you can like a spiritual guru kind of type could come along and but it can create a euphoria at worst. You
Yeah.
see what I'm trying to say? Everybody's like dancing around the guru kind of thing. It's like that is not of interest. There is that, you know. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I call it well, Gaga Guru, right? And it doesn't mean there aren't some very advanced souls that merit the attention of people. That doesn't mean that. I do appreciate they are advanced,
Yeah.
but it's not important. I just know I feel quite confident my Dharma is not quite that. I'm more of a teacher of metaphysics and spiritual science specifically.
Yeah.
So, and so anyway, basically, yeah, it's not an easy question to answer. I've thought about it for a while, but I hate to think about it, but it's like I think it's happening. I
Yeah.
said that already. I think it's going to take a while. I
Yeah.
think it's going to take a handful of decades anyway before and that may come after deeper levels of breakdown.
Oh, I
Like
think
a lot of people don't know it. What would you say?
I think that's very true that it comes at a yeah. And so
The
I think it would
breakdown, the
honest
acknowledgement of the breakdown has not occurred as fully yet. They kind of like not everybody's willing to acknowledge there's a breakdown.
yeah.
They're in a kind of denial, a kind of wishful thinking. They don't realize that there's a disintegration. But I say that, but I think it's fair to say in the past 5 years, say it's that much more obvious that there's a problem
Yeah.
on the
And I
planet,
think
right?
there's a lot of distractions, purposeful distractions that are to me
Yeah.
that are created to be diversions from the real problem. So your focus is here when all of this crap over here is happening that you're not paying attention to. And I feel like that needs to come into the light. And I feel like that's a big, huge piece of it.
Yes, a way of describing it could be also this is that humanity needs to come to a place where it realizes that we have cancer. Humanity has
Yeah.
cancer. So it's like it's less the Russians or the Chinese
Yeah.
and any other or any other culture. It's they have it too.
Yeah. It's
They
global, no
all like so
question.
it's not right. So I'm not like here to pick on world leaders, whomever they may be, and kind of throw my darts at the dartboard and pretend that I understand the real story of the politics, which I see a lot. They're like, oh yeah, la 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 about this politician or that. I'm like, I don't think you know what you're talking about. I think you've been watching the news though religiously. And I think that you have a big bunch of biases going on around your news that you're watching.
Yes.
So, but I don't think you really like, I think it would be if you were intuitive, you would understand you should be more humble,
Mm.
be a bit more humble, like to soon, even there's a lot of very bright journalists out there, especially citizen journalist types say they're off of the mainstream, right?
Right.
Still, like I do appreciate their intelligence, their commitment, and everybody's got to play their part, and I appreciate that. However, yeah, like it's a complex game board,
Yeah.
and the simplest way, right, like in history and power and you know powerful networks that are very ancient on the planet, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
But okay, so but okay, like, and they have invariably those powerful networks, those powerful ancient families. There's families that have lineages that are very, very aware of that go thousands of years, not just like where we hardly know our great grandparents.
Right.
They're that aware. Okay, so it's really different. It's a different paradigm they live in.
Yes.
But the point is that they too will have to come to realize that we have cancer, and it's not, I don't mean to blame them. It's just
Right.
that it's the human story, historic, like the human history is filled with murder based on empire, and we've gotten sick by it.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the ways of saying it. You appreciate what I'm saying?
Yeah,
We've
absolutely.
become sick by the fact, like it's we've become sick by our rationalization that it's okay to kill the neighbors, that it's okay to develop sophisticated weaponry. It can be, our sickness includes massive hypocrisy.
Yes.
Like like these people who will talk about the need to do this or that. Okay, we need to reduce the population or we need to fight them. It's like, okay, well, I think we should start with your children then. We're going to send your children to the front line and we're going to, like, if we're going to reduce the population, we should start with your family,
Right.
right? That's
I don't
the
want to talk
basic
about that
gist
though.
of it. Oh boy, no. No,
Yeah.
no, it's because human beings, yeah. So, yeah, it's a kind of hypocrisy, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess we went on a bit of a tangent. I'm sorry for that. It's just a long-winded kind of thing that it's not a quick fix. It's a journey, but I think the tide is kind of turning. But
Mhm.
as the awakening of it occurs, it may invariably amount to various forms of artificial control for a while.
Mm.
That's my little bit of a concern. Now, artificial control could manifest as what could be called dystopian. That's not a hard prediction, but dystopian is being predicted now. You wonder, are we buying into that, or or is it kind of an intuition that people are thinking we're moving towards dystopian? Like, censorship, drones that can shoot. It's trying to control.
Yeah.
So I think that the knee-jerk reaction as the collective awakening occurs could manifest at, and I'd like to think I'm wrong, first as control. Lock her down.
Yeah.
15 minutes, 15-minute cities or stuff, right? Let's
Yeah.
lock it down. So I think that's why I think it's going to take a while. And then what'll happen is humanity will slowly have to awaken to that being a problem too. And then the healing could start. So it's got a series of stages to it. So there you go. That's a thought. I'm not going to say that in any absolutist way,
Right.
but I think, yeah, I'm a little concerned that the awakening is going to create a control network first,
Mm.
which may not be the word. I don't think that's a fun thing,
No, it
but it
doesn't
may
sound
be
fun
a
at all.
nest. No, it does not sound fun. It may, in the bigger scheme of things, possibly be necessary. I'm not sure. I'd like to think it was, if it was me, maybe I would be, campaigning around the world to get people into their heart chakras. But I realize that it's just not that simple. It's because, see, when you talk about the heart center, that's what they mean by the path.
Hmm.
You can't go to the weekend workshop and get the fix.
Right. Oh, you can't. Yeah, it doesn't happen that way.
Nobody,
It'd be so nice if
yeah,
it
nobody
did.
can
You could
come.
just go to a weekend retreat and then you'd walk out of there all in your heart. That'd be fantastic. But
And people they go get, high on it, which is lovely.
yeah,
But that does not mean they come away awakened. That does not mean they've come away feeling genuinely centered in their heart. And because they are deluded by their mind thinking that the high is the path.
Right.
It's
Right.
a little bit like that. So it's not, so, but it doesn't mean people shouldn't go to retreats and get uh various, like you said, what could have positively amount to be very beautifully fertilized spiritual seeds,
Yes.
right? Like they go get, okay, so that's where these teachers are doing their best. And so I'm not blaming or judging anybody like that, but it's just, I guess I use that phrase and I've come back to it a few times. It's the human condition.
Yes.
The human condition means collectively we have to realize, like, in a beautiful kind of way of saying it, leave no one behind. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I always like that, right? It's very,
Yes.
yes, because it shows an emotional intelligence, and we have empathy for the fact, what if I'm being left behind or you, right? It's like,
Yeah.
no, that leave nobody behind. So, but the point is that the simple fact is it wasn't terribly long ago that, for example, in the United States, there was a civil war.
Hmm.
And not long after there was World War One, then there was World War Two, and even now, Ukraine. So what that and et cetera, et cetera, what I mean by that is these are signs that it's not that near.
Yeah.
It maybe people want to think about divine intervention, and I do appreciate what you said about praying to angelic help, and I think there's a lot to orient ourselves to be in a place of high vibration to like access high vibration. I think that's a very wise thing to say, by the way.
Yeah.
I think that's a power of prayer. But they say it's interesting to say that without reverence, by the way, just PS, it's not, I think you probably have a reverent nature in yourself. Like, in other words, the angelic, there's a kind of innate reverence you have. Like,
Yeah.
so you pray to the angelic because you have an innate reverence. Yeah, that's the word. But unless that's there, they say you can't have access. Hey, angels, I need you to get over here, and I mean now. Kind of thing. And I need some help. And hey, let's go on with it. I'm late. You know,
Right.
the angel's like, I'm not going there. It's because it's just in a funny way. It's a bit of a contradiction to what I said before, but it's like energy matches energy.
Hmm.
So if you're in ego and impatience and manipulation but if you're in uh reverence is the word I like.
Yeah.
It's not worship. Not worship. It's a respect, right? Reverence is I
Yeah.
respect, I revere.
Yes.
Then they're like, then you create a vibration of that. And that's the law of attraction.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, by the way. And I know we're going on a bit, and I'm sorry about that. Just a couple more things.
Yes.
That's what spiritual science, that's why in spiritual science, you'll hear energy, vibration, frequency.
Yes.
And that's part of the awakening, yes, of the law of attraction, energy, vibration, frequency. But people are stuck on, like, even with some fairly known people, like I want a bigger house, I want more money, I want goodies, right? It's called
Yeah.
goodies. So they're working with these law of attraction gurus, right? But
Yes.
I'm like, your law of attraction is operating on the subconscious level as well, and you can't just be and do anything you want. You have a destiny, and if you don't have respect for that, then what you're trying to do is ego land. So they're playing with metaphysical power with their ego, trying
Yeah.
to manifest goodies and
Yes.
opportunities. But the higher path I would offer, D, the higher path would be for people to develop reverence
Yeah.
for higher reality. And then they would start by reverence. What happens almost automatically, it's one of the keys to the heart chakra. You go into a reverent, respectful, humble, like that there's a higher like levels of reality. So you kind of get humbled.
Yeah.
And then that you start creating communion, then you start attracting higher vibration, then you go into a co-creation that will often not be interested in the goodies.
Yeah. I think
You know,
they're
we all
tools.
want.
I agree with you. I think there's so much focus, and I see things because I follow a lot of coaches on my Facebook page. So I'll see a lot of times
Mhm.
where they'll be like, my client earned 10K in 2 weeks. And I've even asked the question before, what if we switched up from a monetary, which there's nothing wrong with money. Okay. We all need it to do what we do,
No.
pay our bills, eat and, all of the things. So it's good. It's a tool. But what if we switched it up from how much your client made or how much you made? Because some will actually post their financials on there and into clients helped. Like, what was the
Yeah.
outcome of that client? Not that they earned money, but what was their spiritual, their soul transformation? What was that? What if we measured our success by that instead of the monetary outcome? Not that the monetary outcome doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying. Because, like I said, I feel like that's a tool. So I feel like when we're in the juice, like we need to be, or like we can be, that those things come also because I feel like Lisa Nichols has a term that uses called 360 abundance, where it's all of the abundance. And it's this big fat everything instead of just this one aspect being success.
Yes, abundance is a lovely, wonderful thing, and I think, quite frankly, you're operating at an enlightened level of coaching compared to m many. That your perspective is more enlightened, in my view. Uh, Even abundance. When is abundance greed? When is abundance like there was this movie I was watching yesterday, and it was saying there's a difference between hunger and appetite.
Yes.
Hunger is what your body needs, but appetite is what you want, and it's greed. So now it's not to get righteous and judgmental, but
Right.
it's at what point that the swaggering guru who has umpteen thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions maybe of followers, and his money is just pouring in, right? It's kind of like, but it's kind of comes to a point where it all represents a type of imbalance.
Mhm.
It's missing the point, and it's focused on abundance or 360 abundance. It's like it's kind of there's just it's all good, but it's basically goes like this. Can and should every okay, maybe this is a bit of a complicated thing to get into, and I don't mean to at this late time in our whole talk, but basically, can others live, can the world sustain your carbon footprint times 7 billion?
Right.
That should be the measuring right there. Can the world sustain your carbon footprint times 7 billion? It's kind of an interesting way of saying it. It may not ever be exact. It shouldn't necessarily be ever that way exactly.
Right.
But like it's some people, they get a lot of attention, but they're popular,
Hmm.
but their message isn't great. I know that sounds a bit judgmental. It's just popular. Popular to me is not what's interesting. But anyway, all of which is simply to say, I kind of like you, I think indirectly and indirectly, we're more focused on awakening
Yes.
and enlightenment. And you want more enlightenment. And doesn't mean we all need money to pay the bills and we want food, clothing, and shelter and, to live health, like people will say, I often hear people say, we're comfortable. Okay. Comfortable's nice, but are you healthy?
Right.
That's the word I would go. And if you're going to talk about health, let's get into whole health.
Exactly.
And it's okay. People encounter illnesses and diseases as a part of their journey of growth. So I'm not suggesting meant to be an Olympic athlete or something.
Right.
But comfortable is materialism. It's actually okay. Healthy. If we get into the word healthy fully, wholly,
Yes.
now we're into this is kind of a sort of a way of describing what we're talking about when you're talking about them. They're talking about comfort, not health,
Right.
if you follow. Like in other words, you made 10 grand that last week and next week and the week after, you're going to be pretty comfortable.
Right. Yeah.
Are you healthy in the ways that society can benefit? Is a kind of a bit of an idealistic statement, but it's kind of an idealistic statement, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating to me. I love people watching and noticing the subtle differences and sometimes not so subtle differences in people. It's absolutely fascinating to me. And I think we talked about self-sabotage before a little bit, and it's incredible to me how much of that we do as a society. We just put our focus in all of these places, and they're not always the most beneficial places to have our focus.
Exactly. And it's part of the game board and the school and the lessons. And I'm not here to myself to suggest that it should specifically be any way. I don't want
Right.
to impose any should,
Right.
more of an
Exactly.
idealism of sorts. And so it's, admittedly, the coach who's achieved a certain level of success to help people achieve things, it's kind of its own celebration. And I appreciate that
Sure.
its own achievement. So good kudos, right? But at worst, it's ironically sort of kind of part of the problem. Ironically, it's because they're not. It's more focused on more as opposed to, let's say, abundance.
Yeah.
But if the conversation were zeroed in more fully, for example, on more health, say,
Yeah.
in the whole sense, we would probably really start to go somewhere. For
Yeah.
example, if humanity has cancer, metaphorically speaking, if that's true,
Yeah.
abundance is not going to do a damn.
Right.
Only thing that's going to do anything is whole health.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's so if I mean, there's different ways of approaching if you're sick. How do you heal? But if you get into a world of a more holistic mindset, you would understand the possibilities of psychosomatic contributions to your cancer,
Mhm.
which could be toxic emotions, um, toxicity in your mind, which can include your emotions. So it goes on like that, right? And it gets into the physical body. So that's where the mind is healer. Ever hear that phrase, mind is healer?
Mhm.
It's sort of suggestion that the illness is sort of lodged somewhere in the mind, which is kind of a bit of a mind bender statement to make. It's like, okay, you can't blame doctors for going at the physical,
Oh,
but
that's a whole nother podcast, isn't it, right there? Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's why I was suggesting, and just on that final note, and I know we've gone on here, but it's that, yes, that's why I would suggest that the healing of the cancer won't be quick because
Yeah,
we haven't fully come around the corner yet to realize that our goal, although it's happening, and definitely,
it is
but
happening.
we haven't. We haven't crossed the fulcrum, if you like,
Yeah.
where the focus needs to be on health, in a whole sense, which is healthy economy, healthy everything, right? A
Yeah.
healthy mind, healthy economy. So that admittedly is the orientation of an enlightened civilization, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's not, we shouldn't expect it. I think it's a safeguard term that it's going to happen quickly because we can get lost in wishful thinking and credulity. Do you know what credulity means? That wonderful word where people are kind of assuming in a very convinced way that a certain something is going to be.
Yes.
They're, yeah, credulous
Yes.
about it. Verse is a more what could be called roll up your sleeves and let's get to it kind of approach. That's why credulity and wishful thinking are twins. Right? They sit beside each other real close, but a roll up your sleeve is just, you know, it's what, as I was kind of hinting, more responsible astrology and all of these tools, whatever they
Yeah.
are that they increase self-awareness and then self-honesty and then personal truth, and then at all of which what I would describe as features of whole health.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree
that's
with
the way
you.
I'm saying it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the people can be achieving great abundance, but be kind of a little bit sick,
Hmm. Yeah.
literally and figurative. Literally and figurative. There's a kind of a collective, but that's just part of it, and it's an ongoing journey, right? Of
Yes.
the human condition and all these good people out there making efforts. Well, what can you say? They're making meaningful contributions, and if other people are coming away feeling, I'm feeling good, well, then it's got to be good.
Yeah. Right.
As long as what they're feeling good about isn't killing the neighbors, we're okay.
That's right. That's a very important
And,
consideration right there, for sure.
because people do feel good sometimes about annihilating the enemy. It's kind of a scary thought,
Yes, it is.
but if we go into that, we have this disease. Now we're back in inclusivity. There's no finger pointing. There's no character assassinations.
Right.
We're not like throwing darts at politicians, if you like,
Yes.
pretending that we know what's going on really.
Right.
Uh, you know, we're more full, and it turns our attention. Because what happens, by the way, is people kind of have all this in their head, and then they will go shift back into low vibration living.
Yes.
Low vibration living just simply meaning back into their relative confusion.
Yeah.
It's, it's they're pretty strong statements I'm making. I appreciate what we've been talking about today. It's fairly strong. It's definitely in the realm of higher minded, idealistic orientation. I
Oh,
do
yeah.
appreciate
It's
just to be.
been some deep conversation today, which is my favorite.
Yeah,
It's my favorite because I feel like I'm always learning when we have these deep conversations. But it's not for the faint of heart, for sure. It's for people who
yeah.
are really ready to see the world in a different way, to see themselves in a different way.
To me, I call it
Yeah.
uh, creative critical thinking versus believing and or getting high on the information. I'm not myself interested in getting you high. There's a lot of that out there. People getting high in many ways.
Yes.
So high is not just substance abuse. You can get high on knowledge,
Yes.
uh, high on popular trends, and so they kind of enter into kind of a euphoric high believe or wannabe land.
Hmm.
Uh, it's a little bit more sober. Let's inspire and empower each other to do the work And that is going on. There are those people are coming out and coming forward, and others are paying attention. And so that's why I'm excited. I guess you could say I'm heartened and faithful that at least at this time, it's to me, I see it as a synchronicity of the collective that it, intuitively and so forth, maybe even by destiny, definitely, in fact, but intuitively, yeah, you yourself, you're part of that, right there. I myself, that just not like we're better, it's
Right.
just, but that we're working. We're
Yeah,
not
and
better.
exactly. And
We're
that's
working. We're working.
yeah, and one of the things I said to another girl that I interviewed on my podcast was that it's not about being better or even knowing more, honestly, than some other people. It's the fact that you are willing to step forward into the limelight and share that. That's the big
Exactly.
differentiation to me. It's not that there's any betterness involved because I honestly don't feel like one human is better than the next in any kind of way. I just feel like some
Yeah.
people have more knowledge. They are willing to step into the light and be seen
Yeah.
and heard, sharing that knowledge and talking to other people who are also willing to step into that space. To me, that's the big distinction between that.
Nice. Yes, I appreciate that. Yeah, I use the phrase doing the work, and I think it's the same thing you're saying. They're doing the work.
Yeah.
So it's, you said it, they're just not the tide turning to more people kind of doing, the work, meaning
Yeah. Yes.
their work, their work, their way.
Yeah.
I appreciate that for sure. That's what the inclusion's all about.
Yes.
No sense, not massive censoring, which I suppose I could be guilty of when I was talking. It gets tricky. It gets tricky because we have our opinions, our feelings, our biases, and stuff like that.
Sure.
But yeah, just doing the work and the exploration of how and why astrology works. Yeah, that's why I'm so interested in multidimensionality. I've created a handful of master classes. One of them is called Understanding Multidimensionality, and it
Yes.
pitches at helping people understand this ancient perennial philosophy, this appreciation, which is ancient,
Yeah.
of multidimensionality. I didn't make it up. I just discovered it in my quest to understand how and why does astrology work, and it took me into archetypal psychology. Then I said, well, how does that work? And
Yeah.
next thing you know, I'm kind of coming to appreciate at least this multidimensional layered subtle realms of existence, which is as fundamentally the same as our laptops have levels of knowledge, and like it's clearly a relatively simple looking cell phone, right? Simple looking
Yeah.
is highly sophisticated with multiple layers.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Our body is designed of multiple layers, right? If you
Yeah.
study anatomy, you go layer upon layer upon layer. The skin itself is several layers,
Yes.
right? So when you get into it's not the dimensionality of mathematics, as interesting as that is with its 11 dimensions. I think that's very exciting.
Yeah.
But I think that's dimensions of the physical, which again I think is wonderful. So I agree with you, by the way, just coming full circle, I agree that the science that is breaking through the barriers, that and the genius, whatever form, and making contributions,
Hmm.
especially when it breaks through linear logic solely,
Yeah.
right? When it does that, then you're like, oh, now we're getting somewhere,
I
right?
know. I'm like,
Uh,
yeah, give me that.
yeah, let's go there, and it gets into this whole, break down the old. I'm a big fan of Nassim Harriman, who, do you know him?
It sounds vaguely familiar, the name, but I'm not
He
extremely
could
familiar.
be a you could possibly get him on your show. You never know. He
Oh,
probably gets asked a lot because he's barely known, but he's a spiritual physicist, you could say. I don't know how he exactly describes himself, but I would place him in the category of a quantum physicist.
nice.
Okay, okay, I think he's a quantum physicist, basically. And he yeah taught he's brilliant at in the levels of physics, but he's deeply interested in sacred geometry, and sacred geometry is the access of that's when we talk about multidimensionality.
Hmm.
We get into the blueprint when we talk about when I was talking about the archangels and the blueprint.
Yeah.
That can be that is the what sacred geometry is pointing at. So sacred geometry is I've come to realize that astrology isn't based on cosmic rays. No, 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 no. It's interdimensional blueprint, and the sacred geometry is the key. So like for me to study, like if I were to teach you astrology, I would be teaching you foundational sacred geometry. Then because I would help you understand the difference that astronomy is not astrology.
Right.
Astronomy reveals the mechanical features of astrology, but when you take the sun in the sky, which is like astronomy, sun's not really in the sky because we're in the sun, by the way. We live in the body of the sun actually, because it's
Wow.
expanded to. Okay, there's a whole other conversation. If you want to have that one, let me know.
I do.
But okay, let's do
I
it.
want to
We'll,
have
we'll do
all the
more. Yeah.
conversations, Michael.
Okay, you're all well. I'll get into okay. So yeah, this whole when you get into the cosmological of the planets, etc. But the thing
Yeah.
is, this is important. When you take the symbol of the sun and you put it on a mandala, that is the beginning of the understanding of astrology. It's not simply a sky map. That's what most people get mixed up on. They're
Yes.
thinking it's a sky. No, 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 no. The symbol of the sun is on a mandala. The mandala is a tool of sacred geometrical proportion, which is accessing multidimensionality. Then you understand what you're talking about.
That's
Everything else is an illusion. That's why there's a lot of confusion in the astrological world because they're getting lost in the notion of cosmic being. You said it yourself, out there. Like, okay, the cosmos is out there, it's true. But the true cosmic consciousness is understanding the blueprint that's in there, that is the blueprint of what's out there. So if you don't do the blueprint
yeah.
of what's out there, you are exoterically, like they're not focused on the true essence. And that's happening a lot in the astrological world. That's why I mentioned it.
Yeah.
So archetypal psychology is the blueprint of in there. And I'm mentioning the sacred geometry because it's the science and the mechanics. And that's why I mentioned this Nassim Haramein. He's bringing sacred geometry into physics.
That's awesome. I'm going to check it
That's what
out for sure.
Nassim Haramein, Harreiman, I believe. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to check them out for sure.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, we probably have, we've had some fun,
We've been
haven't we?
chatting a long time. It's so funny because the other day I said, well, I don't have as many viewers as Joe Rogan, so I don't know if I can pull off those 3 and 4 hour podcasts, but guess what we just did?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So,
maybe you'll get there, Dee. Maybe you'll get there. I think he's pretty cool. He definitely, Joe Rogan, he pushes the envelope. I got to
oh,
hand
he
it to him for
does.
that.
He does. He
He
is not
does. Yeah,
afraid. That is
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure, that Joe Rogan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's ballsy, and I think his
Yeah.
heart's in the right place.
Yes,
I
I agree with
I
you.
don't watch him a ton. I know who he is, and I've watched him a
Yeah.
few times. I thought, okay, that's pretty gutsy. He's got some
Yeah.
heart, And I like that. So,
I do too. So
yeah.
thank you for joining me again.
Oh, you're welcome. My
We are
pleasure.
definitely going to do this again because I'm totally digging it. And I know that this, without question and fear of contradiction, that this will reach who it is supposed to reach 100%. So
That's a nice way of saying it. Thank you. And so wonderful. We can maybe perhaps in the future, if you like, we can target areas of focus. I think what we did today was good just by this human condition,
yes,
where we're all at, and I think that's what I wanted to do, quite
yes,
frankly, kind of offer a bit of a bigger paradigm of perception of that the human condition is the outer expression of the soul journey of learning in the physical, etc., which I mentioned last time, I believe is to be, we're here to learn to be responsible co-creators. And this is like the school, the boot camp
yeah,
where, we learn. So that's kind of my way of looking at it. And, but we can be more specific.
yes,
This big picture perspective is great,
yeah,
I think.
yes,
It gives that, hey, there's the big picture, but, we can here and there zero in and play with it.
yes, absolutely. Well, thank you once
Right.
again, and we'll get
Oh,
another
yes, my pleasure.
meeting scheduled. And
Okay, wonderful, Dee. Thank you very much. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your day, and look forward to next time.
yes, me too. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone
You're
for joining
welcome.
in to this episode of Spiritually Speaking. I know you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And as always, I will see you on the next episode, and I love you all.